I am Joshua, 34 years old, and yesterday, my own brother looked me in the eye and threw me out of the only home I've ever known while the dirt on our parents' graves was still fresh. Before I tell you about the moment the lawyer wiped that smug grin off his face and changed my life forever, let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments. I read every single one of them. It was raining. Of course, it was raining. It felt like the sky was trying to wash away the sins of the earth, or maybe it was just crying because it knew what was about to happen. I stood there on the cobblestone driveway, the rain soaking through my cheap black suit, clutching a soggy cardboard box that contained 34 years of my existence. The heavy oak front door of the estate didn't slam. That would have been too passionate, too human. No, it closed with a solid, heavy thud. A final, decisive click of the lock that echoed in the hollow space of my chest. My brother, Ethan, stood on the other side of that door. But just moments before, he had been standing right where I was, leaning casually against the hood of the brand-new, black Rolls-Royce Cullinan that had been delivered that morning. He had lit a cigarette, shielding the flame from the wind with a gold Zippo lighter that used to belong to our father. "Find somewhere else to die," he had said, smoke curling out of his mouth like a dragon guarding its hoard. "You're useless now. The house needs someone who matches its stature, Josh. Not a leech." I hadn't said a word. I never did. Silence was my defense mechanism. It was the armor I had built over 3 decades of being the second choice, the backup plan, the invisible man. I looked down at the box in my arms. A few shirts, my laptop, a framed photo of me and Mom from a time before she got too sick to remember my name, and my ledger. That ledger was the only thing that really mattered. But Ethan didn't know that. He thought it was just another boring accounting book. He didn't know it was the map to the entire empire. Behind the glass of the second-floor balcony, I saw her. Vanessa, my sister-in-law. She was holding a glass of red wine, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my car. She wasn't looking at me with pity. She was looking at me like you look at a stain on a rug before you call the cleaners. She raised her glass in a mock toast, then turned her back. That hurt more than the door closing. It was the confirmation that this wasn't just Ethan's impulsive rage. This was a coup. Planned, calculated excision. I walked to my car, a 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the rear bumper and an engine that rattled when it idled. It looked like a piece of scrap metal parked next to that gleaming Rolls-Royce Cullinan. That car, the Rolls, was the first thing Ethan bought with the advance he took from the estate funds. He hadn't even waited for the probate process to clear. He just assumed the money was his because, well, he was Ethan. He was the firstborn, the golden boy, the football star, the one Dad always clapped for, even when he fumbled. I threw the box into the passenger seat. Water dripped from my hair onto the steering wheel as I sat there, shivering. I put the key in the ignition, but I didn't turn it. I just stared at the house. It was a mansion, really. 6 bedrooms, 7 baths, a library, a pool house. It was worth millions on its own, not counting the portfolio, the stocks, the offshore accounts. $28 million. That was the number the estate appraisers had whispered. And now it all belonged to Ethan. Or so he thought. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from the bank. Joint account frozen. I let out a bitter laugh. He didn't waste any time. That account was the one I used to pay for the house maintenance, the landscaping crew, the property taxes, and Mom's medical bills. It had my name on it, but it was funded by Dad's money. Ethan must have called the banker immediately. He was cutting off my oxygen supply. I started the car. The engine coughed, then roared to life. As I backed out of the driveway, the iron gates began to close automatically. I watched the house disappear behind the metal bars. It felt like I was leaving a prison, not a home, but the fear was real. Where was I going to go? I had less than $2,000 in my personal checking account. My salary as the family's financial manager, a title Dad gave me to make me feel important while paying me peanuts, had stopped the moment his heart stopped. I drove aimlessly for an hour. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windshield. I thought about the funeral earlier that day, the hypocrisy of it all. Ethan standing at the podium, wearing a suit that was too tight, talking about sacrifice and family values. He didn't shed a tear. He just looked at the audience, making sure the important business partners saw him. I was the one who had held Dad's hand when he took his last breath. I was the one who wiped the vomit off his chin when the chemo made him sick. I was the one who managed the morphine drip so he wouldn't be in pain. Ethan? Ethan was in Cabo San Lucas, networking. "I'm sorry, Josh." Dad had whispered that last night. His voice was so weak, like dry leaves rustling. "I'm sorry it has to be this hard." I thought he was apologizing for the pain of dying. Now, driving away from my inheritance, I realized he might have meant something else. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner. I needed coffee. I needed to think. I grabbed my laptop bag and ran inside. The place smelled like bacon grease and stale coffee, a stark contrast to the lemon polish and lavender scent of the estate. I ordered a black coffee and opened my laptop. I needed to see the damage. I tried to log into the Family Foundation's email server. Access denied. Your password has been changed. I tried the investment portal. Access denied. He had locked me out of everything. It wasn't just about the house. He was trying to erase me. He wanted to make sure I couldn't see the numbers, couldn't see how fast he was going to burn through the money. A wave of panic rose in my throat. I wasn't worried about the money for myself. I was a simple guy. I didn't need Bentleys or caviar. But that money was Dad's life work. It was supposed to fund the charity, the scholarship program, the things that actually mattered. Ethan would drain it dry in 5 years. I knew his spending habits. I knew about his gambling debts in Vegas that I had quietly covered up for years to protect the family name. I sat there, staring at the access denied screen, feeling the weight of my own uselessness. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just a glorified secretary. I had spent my life cleaning up their messes, hiding their scandals, balancing their books, and what did I have to show for it? A wetsuit and a frozen bank account. But then, I remembered something. 3 days before he died, Dad asked me to bring him his old leather satchel, the one he kept locked in the safe in his study. He took out a thick blue folder and handed it to me. "Don't open this until the funeral is over," he had said, his eyes surprisingly clear for a moment. "And don't let Ethan see it. Ever." I had put that folder in my car trunk, under the spare tire, thinking it was just sentimental letters or maybe instructions for his burial. I had forgotten about it in the chaos of the funeral and the eviction. I slammed my laptop shut, threw a $5 bill on the table, and ran back out to the car. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I popped the trunk. I lifted the carpet, shoved the spare tire aside. It was there, the blue folder. I grabbed it and sat back in the driver's seat. I turned on the dome light. My hands were shaking as I undid the string tie. Inside, there wasn't a letter. There was a legal document. But it wasn't the will. The header read, "The Karma Trust, restated and amended." I started reading. The legal jargon was dense, archaic stuff about grantors and beneficiaries and fiduciary duties. But I was an accountant. I spoke this language better than I spoke English sometimes. As I scanned the pages, my breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a trust fund. It was a trap, a beautifully constructed, legally binding spiderweb. And right there on page 4 was a clause that made my blood run cold and then hot all at once. Clause 12.4, the displacement provision. I read it twice, then a third time. I looked back at the house in my mind's eye. I pictured Ethan drinking Dad's scotch, thinking he had won the lottery. I pictured Vanessa planning her next shopping spree in Paris. A smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who just realized he wasn't holding a pair of deuces, but a royal flush. "You want me to find somewhere else to die, Ethan?" I whispered to the empty car. "I think I'll survive. But you? You're already dead." I started the engine again. This time, the rattle didn't bother me. I wasn't driving aimlessly anymore. I knew exactly where I was going. I needed a lawyer. And not the family lawyer who was in Ethan's pocket. I needed a shark. I spent that first night in a motel that charged by the hour. The sheets smelled like bleach and bad decisions, but I didn't sleep anyway. I sat in the wobbly chair by the window, watching the neon sign flicker, and let the memories wash over me. The anger needed fuel, and I had 30 years of it stockpiled. Growing up, the dynamic was set in stone before I could even walk. Ethan was the sun, and I was just a minor planet caught in his gravity, destined to orbit him but never generate my own light. I remember my 10th birthday. I had asked for a telescope. I wanted to see the stars, to understand how the universe worked. Dad bought Ethan a dirt bike that same weekend, just because. My birthday party turned into Ethan's motocross show. All the relatives stood on the porch, cheering as he tore up the lawn, mud flying everywhere. I sat alone on the swing set, holding my telescope, watching him destroy the grass. Mom brought me a slice of cake later, after everyone had left. "He's just spirited, Josh," she said, stroking my hair. "You're the sensible one. You understand, don't you?" I always understood. Being sensible was code for don't complain. It got worse in high school. Ethan was the quarterback. I was the math tutor. He got the girls, the glory, and the keys to Dad's vintage Mustang. I got the responsibility. When Ethan got caught with beer in the locker room, Dad made a donation to the school's new gymnasium fund, and the suspension disappeared. When I got an A+ on my calculus final, Dad nodded and said, "Good, that's what's expected." But the real resentment, the kind that burns a hole in your stomach, started 5 years ago. That was when Dad had his first stroke. It was a Tuesday. I was working at a mid-sized accounting firm downtown, trying to build a career of my own, trying to escape the family shadow. Mom called, screaming. I rushed to the hospital, beating the ambulance there. For 3 weeks, Dad was in the ICU. Ethan was on a ski trip in Aspen with Vanessa. I called him every day. "Dad might not make it," I told him, my voice cracking. "Look, Josh," he said, the sound of a party in the background. "Dad's a fighter. He'll be fine. Plus, these tickets were non-refundable. Just handle it, okay? You're good at handling the boring stuff." The boring stuff, that's what he called our father's survival. So I handled it. I took a leave of absence from my job, which eventually turned into a resignation because I couldn't juggle the caretaking and the deadlines. I moved back into the estate. I learned how to read heart monitors. I learned the names of every nurse on the night shift. I managed the insurance claims, the physical therapy schedules, the dietary restrictions. When Dad finally came home, he was in a wheelchair. He was weak, angry, and bitter. He lashed out at the person closest to him. Me. "You're moving me too slow," he would yell when I helped him into bed. Ethan would be stronger. Ethan would know how to lift me. I took it. I swallowed the insults like bitter pills. "Ethan isn't here, Dad," I would say softly. "He's busy with the business." That was the lie we all told. Ethan wasn't busy with the business. He was busy draining it. He had convinced Dad to give him a seat on the board of the family's real estate development firm. Dad, in his delusional pride, agreed. He wanted his legacy to be carried by his firstborn. I saw the books. I saw the business expenses. 5-star dinners, private jet charters, consulting fees paid to companies that didn't exist. Ethan was bleeding the company dry. One night, about a year ago, I confronted him. It was in the garage. Ethan had just come home in a Porsche Panamera with a smashed front bumper. He was drunk, stumbling, smelling like expensive scotch and cheap perfume. "You hit something?" I asked, looking at the damage. Some trash can," he slurred. "Or maybe a parked car. Who cares? Ethan, you can't drive like this. If the police—" "Shut up, nerd," he shoved me. I stumbled back against the workbench. "You think you're better than me because you wiped Dad's ass? You're nothing. You're the help. I'm the heir." The next morning, the police came knocking. A hit and run. A parked car had been totaled 3 blocks away. Dad was sitting in the living room, looking terrifyingly frail. Ethan was standing there, looking pale and sweaty. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. For all his bravado, he was a coward. Josh was driving the car, Dad said suddenly to the officers. I froze. I looked at Dad. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw set. Joshua, Dad said, his voice cold. Tell the officers you took the car for a joyride. I looked at Ethan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was letting me take the fall. Again. Yes, I said, my voice hollow. It was me. I'm sorry. I took the points on my license. I paid the fine. I took the shame. Why? Because I thought loyalty mattered. I thought that if I carried the cross long enough, they would eventually appreciate the weight of it. How wrong I was. Sitting in that motel room, realizing that my reward for a lifetime of sacrifice was a cardboard box and an eviction, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet sound of a bridge burning. I opened the blue folder again. The Karma Trust. I began to connect the dots. The timeline of the document date matched that week after the Porsche accident. Had Dad known? Had he finally seen Ethan for what he was? Or was this just another game? I remembered the lawyer, Mr. Henderson. Old man Henderson had been Dad's attorney for 40 years. He was a stone-faced sphinx who never gave anything away. But looking back, I remembered the way he looked at me during the meetings. Not with the dismissal my family showed, but with curiosity, assessment. I pulled out my phone. It was 3 a.m., but I didn't care. I drafted an email to Sarah. Sarah was my one friend from high school who stuck around. She wasn't just a friend. She was a brilliant paralegal who worked at a rival firm to Henderson's. Subject: I need you. War is coming. Body: Ethan kicked me out. I have a document. I think Dad pulled a fast one. Meet me at the Waffle House on 4th at 7 a.m. Bring your legal brain and a lot of caffeine. I hit send. I laid back on the lumpy mattress. I closed my eyes, but all I could see was the smirk on Ethan's face. Find somewhere else to die. No, brother, I whispered to the dark ceiling. I'm not going to die. I'm going to live, and I'm going to make sure you watch every second of it from the cheap seats. The next morning, reality hit me harder than the hangover I didn't even have. I woke up not in the motel bed, but in my car. I had checked out at 5 a.m. to save money. I was parked behind a shopping mall, watching the sunrise reflect off the dumpsters. My back ached, my suit was wrinkled, and I felt a layer of grime on my skin that soap couldn't wash off. It was the grime of poverty, the sudden, violent shift from living in a mansion to living out of a sedan. I checked my bank app again. Still frozen. My credit cards? Declined at the gas pump. Ethan must have reported them lost or stolen. He was thorough, I'll give him that. He wanted to paralyze me. He knew that without resources, I couldn't fight a legal battle. Lawyers cost money. Survival costs money. I drove to the Waffle House to meet Sarah. She was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking like a beacon of hope in a sea of grease. She had her laptop open and 2 coffees waiting. You look like hell, Josh, she said as I slid into the booth. No hello, no pity, just facts. That's why I loved her. Ethan threw me out, I said, taking a sip of the coffee. It burned and the pain felt good. He took the house, the cars, the accounts. Everything. Sarah's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. He can't just take it. Probate takes months. There's a process. He's Ethan. He doesn't wait for processes. He has the keys and he has the lawyers. And he has Vanessa whispering in his ear. I slid the blue folder across the sticky table. But I have this. Sarah opened it. As she read, her eyebrows climbed higher and higher. She stopped eating her hash browns. She started mumbling legal terms under her breath. Irrevocable, grantor retainment, contingent beneficiary. Holy crap. What? I asked, leaning in. Josh. She looked up, her eyes wide. This isn't a standard will. This is a nuclear option. Did your dad hate Ethan? He worshipped him. Or so I thought. Well, he had a funny way of showing it. This trust structure, it's designed to bypass probate entirely. The assets don't go to the heirs in the traditional sense. They go to the trust. And the trust is controlled by a single trustee. Let me guess, I said, my stomach tightening. Ethan. No. Sarah pointed to a paragraph on page 7. The trustee is unnamed in this section. It refers to the designated party defined in the sealed addendum. But look at the powers. The trustee has absolute discretion over distributions. Absolute. That means the trustee decides who gets paid and who starves. So if Ethan is the trustee, I'm dead. If Ethan is the trustee, Sarah corrected. Why would your dad include clause 12.4? The displacement of kin clause? Listen to this. If any beneficiary attempts to displace, evict, or cause homelessness to any immediate family member residing in the estate prior to the official reading of the will, their status as beneficiary is immediately revoked. The diner noise faded away. Revoked. He triggered it, I whispered. He literally kicked me out yesterday. He told me to find somewhere else to die. Did you record it? Sarah asked instantly. Lawyer brain. No. But I remembered something. The security cameras. The driveway has cameras. They record everything to the cloud server. The server I used to manage. I grabbed my laptop. I prayed Ethan hadn't changed the password for the security system yet. He was tech illiterate. He probably thought changing the Wi-Fi password was enough. I logged into the security provider's portal. Access granted. My hands flew across the keyboard. I found the timestamp. Yesterday, 2:15 p.m. There it was. In high definition. Me standing in the rain. Ethan leaning on the Rolls-Royce. The audio was crisp. Find somewhere else to die, you're useless now. I downloaded the clip. I saved it to my hard drive, then to the cloud, then emailed it to Sarah. We have him, Sarah said, a savage grin appearing on her face. We have the smoking gun. But just as hope started to rise, my phone pinged. An email. It was from Marcus, Ethan's assistant. Marcus was a terrified kid, fresh out of college, who Ethan bullied relentlessly. Subject, FWD, urgent, sale confirmation message. Josh, I'm not supposed to do this. He'll kill me, but this feels wrong. He's selling the art. Attached was a forwarded email chain between Ethan and a private art dealer. Ethan was arranging the immediate sale of Dad's collection of Impressionist paintings. The price was significantly under market value for a quick cash deal. And the reason? The email below explained it all. From Lamborghini dealership to Ethan subject. Your Revuelto build slot, Mr. Ethan. We need the $500,000 deposit by Friday to secure your custom Revuelto. As discussed, this will be the first one in the state. I stared at the screen. He was selling Dad's legacy. Paintings Dad had spent 40 years collecting. To buy a supercar. A Lamborghini Revuelto. He already had the Rolls-Royce. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. He's liquidating the assets, I told Sarah, showing her the phone. If we wait for a court date, the money will be gone. He's going to burn through $28 million in a year. We can't wait, Sarah said, slamming the folder shut. We need to trigger the reading. Now, who is the lawyer of record? Henderson. Robert Henderson. Sarah whistled. The Iron Duke. He's tough. But if he drafted this trust, he knows exactly what's in it. Why hasn't he stepped in? Maybe he's waiting for me, I realized. Dad said, read the instructions. Maybe this is a test. If I walk away, Ethan wins. If I fight, then you prove you're the one worthy of the trust, Sarah finished. I stood up. I felt a surge of adrenaline that wiped away the exhaustion. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the hunter. Sarah, I need you to draft a formal demand for the reading of the will and the execution of the trust provisions. Cite the displacement clause. Attach the video file. On it. Where are you going? I'm going to get a suit, I said, looking down at my rumpled clothes. I can't walk into Henderson's office looking like a homeless person. If I'm going to take down the king, I need to look like the emperor. I didn't have access to my accounts, but I had one thing left. My watch. A vintage Omega my grandfather gave me. It was the only valuable thing I owned that wasn't tied to the family estate. I pawned it an hour later. It hurt, physically hurt, to hand it over for a fraction of its worth. But I walked out with $3,000 in cash. I went to a department store. I bought a charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and a tie that was the color of blood. I got a haircut. I shaved. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the tired caregiver anymore. I saw a man who had survived the fire and was now bringing the torch. I drove to Henderson's office tower. I walked past the receptionist who tried to stop me. I marched straight to the heavy mahogany doors of his private office and pushed them open. Henderson was sitting behind his desk, reviewing documents. He didn't look surprised. He looked up, took off his reading glasses, and studied me. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady, "my brother has violated the terms of the trust. I'm here to claim what's mine." Henderson leaned back in his leather chair. A slow, cryptic smile spread across his face. "You're late, Joshua," he said. "I expected you yesterday." The office smelled of old paper and expensive tobacco. Mr. Henderson didn't invite me to sit, so I stood. I preferred it. Standing made me feel ready to fight. "I had to retrieve the file from the safe," I replied, placing the blue folder on his desk. "And I had to survive being thrown out onto the street." Henderson picked up the folder. His hands were spotted with age, but his movements were precise. "Ethan acted predictably then?" "He did exactly what Dad knew he would do. He kicked me out. He claimed the house. And he's already liquidating assets to buy a Lamborghini." Henderson sighed, a sound of deep disappointment. "Not at me, but at the situation. Your father hoped Ethan would change. He hoped the responsibility of the potential inheritance would sober him up. But Arthur was a realist. That's why he created the Karma Trust." "The displacement clause," I said. "It revokes his status as a beneficiary." "It does more than that," Henderson said, opening a drawer and pulling out a sealed envelope. "It triggers the succession plan." He tapped the envelope on the desk. "This contains the name of the true trustee, the person who holds the keys to the kingdom. It was to be opened only after the funeral, or upon a breach of the moral clauses." "Is it Uncle Ben?" I asked. I had suspected maybe Dad left it to his brother, a neutral party. Henderson shook his head. "We will find out at the official reading. I have scheduled it for tomorrow at noon. At the house. Ethan won't let me in." "He will," Henderson said, his voice dropping an octave, "because I control the flow of money until the trustee is named. And right now, Ethan is trying to spend money he doesn't officially have yet. I frozen the main accounts this morning when I saw the withdrawal request for the car dealership." I felt a surge of vindication. He must be furious. He is apoplectic. He's called me 10 times. I haven't answered. Henderson stood up. "Go get some rest, Joshua. You look like a soldier who's been in the trenches. Tomorrow the war ends." I left the office feeling lighter, but the anxiety was still there. Who was the trustee? If it wasn't Ethan, and it wasn't me, Dad never trusted me with the big decisions, or so I thought. Then who? A bank? A corporate fiduciary? If a bank took over, they would sell the house and turn the charity into a tax write-off. I met Sarah back at her apartment. She had turned her living room into a war room. Whiteboards were covered in timelines and legal precedents. "Okay," she said, handing me a beer. "I've dug into the custody of the estate assets. Ethan has physically taken possession of the house and the cars, but legally he's trespassing. The house is titled to the trust, not him personally." "He doesn't care about titles," I said, pacing the room. "He cares about appearances. He's probably throwing a party right now to celebrate his inheritance." "Let him," Sarah said. "The higher he climbs, the harder the fall. But Josh, you need to be prepared for what happens if you aren't the one in charge." "I don't expect to be in charge," I admitted. "I just want to stop him from destroying everything." If the trustee is a third party, I can petition them to audit Ethan. I can save the foundation. You really don't care about the money, do you? Sarah looked at me with a soft expression. I care about justice, I said. And I care about the fact that he treated me like garbage for 30 years. I'm done being the doormat. That night, I slept on Sarah's couch. It was comfortable, warm, and safe. But my dreams were filled with images of the house. The library where I taught myself accounting. The garden where Mom used to grow roses. The garage where I fixed the cars Ethan wrecked. It wasn't just a building. It was my history, and Ethan was squatting on it. The next morning, I dressed in my new suit. I tied my tie with military precision. I checked my phone. No missed calls from Ethan. He probably thought I was rotting in a gutter somewhere. Sarah drove me to the estate. As we pulled up to the gate, the security guard, old Mr. Roberts, whom I had known for 10 years, looked hesitant. Mr. Ethan said no visitors, Roberts said, looking down at his clipboard. I'm not a visitor, Roberts, I said, leaning out the window. And Mr. Henderson is right behind me. A black town car pulled up behind us. Henderson's driver honked. Roberts, looking relieved to have an excuse, opened the gates. We drove up the winding driveway. The lawn was littered with red plastic cups. There had been a party. The Rolls-Royce was parked on the grass, like a grotesque lawn ornament. My stomach churned. The disrespect. I got out of the car. Sarah stood beside me, holding her briefcase like a weapon. Henderson stepped out of his town car, looking like the Grim Reaper in a three-piece suit. Shall we? Henderson asked. We walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I used my key, the one I had kept. The lock turned. We stepped into the foyer. It was a mess. Bottles everywhere. Music was still playing softly from the speakers. Who the hell is that? Ethan appeared at the top of the grand staircase. He was wearing a silk robe, looking hungover and angry. Vanessa was behind him, looking equally disheveled. I told you to get lost, Ethan shouted, starting to descend the stairs. And how dare you bring people here? This is my house. Mr. Ethan, Henderson's voice boomed, cutting through the air like a gavel strike. It is not your house. Not yet, and perhaps not ever. Ethan froze. He saw the lawyer. He saw the stern look. He tried to compose himself. He smoothed his hair and forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Henderson, good. I've been trying to reach you. We need to release the funds. I have deposits to make. We are here for the reading of the will and the trust disclosure, Henderson said calmly. Please sit down. All of you. I don't need a reading, Ethan scoffed, walking into the living room and flopping onto the couch. I know what it says. I'm the eldest. I get the lot. Josh gets, I don't know, a pat on the back. Vanessa giggled nervously. She was eyeing Sarah, trying to figure out who she was. I sat in the armchair opposite Ethan. I sat up straight, feet planted on the floor. I looked him in the eye. He looked away. Let's get this over with, Ethan muttered. I have a car coming at 2 p.m. You might want to cancel that, I said quietly. Shut up, loser, Ethan snapped. Henderson sat at the head of the coffee table. He placed the blue folder on the table. He placed the sealed envelope next to it. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time was up. The atmosphere in the living room was suffocating. The air conditioner hummed, but sweat was already beading on Ethan's forehead. He was tapping his foot aggressively against the expensive Persian rug. Henderson put on his reading glasses. He took his time, prolonging the moment. He opened the blue folder. This is the last will and testament of Arthur James Sterling, and the governing document of the Karma Trust, Henderson began. His voice was devoid of emotion, a dry recitation of facts. To my wife Martha, who predeceased me, to various charities. Henderson droned on through the minor bequests. Ethan rolled his eyes. Skip to the good part, Henderson. The estate, the liquid assets. The house. Henderson stopped reading. He looked over his glasses at Ethan. Impatience, Ethan, is a poor quality in a leader. I'm not a leader. I'm an owner. Ethan shot back. Just read it. Very well. Henderson turned the page. Regarding the residuary estate comprising the family home, the investment portfolio valued at approximately $28 million, and all personal chattel, these assets are bequeathed in their entirety to the Karma Trust. Great! Ethan waved his hand. And I'm the beneficiary of the trust. We know this. Move on. You were a conditional beneficiary, Henderson corrected. The word hung in the air. Were. Ethan stopped tapping his foot. What do you mean, were? Henderson cleared his throat. Clause 12.4, the displacement of kin provision. If the primary conditional beneficiary takes any action to displace, evict, or cause undue hardship to any immediate family member residing in the family home prior to the official execution of this trust, their status as beneficiary is immediately and irrevocably revoked. Ethan laughed. It was a nervous, brittle sound. That's ridiculous. It's my house. I can kick out whoever I want. Josh isn't a family member in this context. He's a squatter. He's 34 years old. He is your brother, Henderson said sharply, and we have evidence that you forcibly removed him from the premises yesterday, immediately following the funeral. So what? Vanessa chimed in, her voice shrill. It's a technicality. You can't take away $28 million because of a sibling fight. It is not a technicality, Mrs. Sterling. It is a character test, Henderson said. A test your husband failed. Ethan's face went from pale to red. He stood up. I don't care about your stupid test. I'm the son. I'm the heir. If you try to cut me out, I'll sue this estate into the ground. I'll hire the best lawyers in the city. With what money? I spoke up for the first time. Ethan whirled on me. Shut your mouth. This is your fault. You planted this. I didn't plant anything, I said calmly. Dad wrote this 5 years ago. He knew you, Ethan. He knew exactly who you were. Sit down, Ethan, Henderson commanded. The authority in his voice was absolute. Ethan sank back onto the couch, looking like a deflated balloon. Since the displacement clause has been triggered, Henderson continued, picking up the sealed envelope, the trust now moves to the secondary succession plan, the appointment of the sole trustee and beneficiary. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. Henderson broke the wax seal. The crackling sound seemed deafening. He pulled out a single sheet of cream-colored paper. He read it silently first. Then he looked up. A genuine smile touched his lips. He looked directly at Ethan. Did you even read the will, Ethan? Or the letters your father sent you over the years? Just read the damn name. Ethan screamed. Henderson looked at me. The sole trustee with full power of attorney, full ownership of the assets, and absolute discretion over the funds, is Joshua David Sterling. The silence that followed was absolute. I felt the air leave my lungs. Me? Not a bank? Not a charity? Me? Ethan sat there, mouth open, processing the words. Then he shook his head. No, that's a lie. Dad thought Josh was a loser. He told me. He always said Josh was too soft. He said that to you, Henderson said softly, to test your arrogance. But in his private journals and in his conversations with me, he called Joshua the only one who understands the value of $1 and the value of a person. He watched you, Joshua. He watched you care for him when he was sick. He watched you take the blame for the car accident. Ethan flinched at the mention of the car accident. He knew, I whispered. He knew everything, Henderson said. He knew Ethan was driving. He knew you took the fall to protect the family. That was the moment, Joshua. That was when he decided to give it all to you. But he had to wait. He had to see if Ethan would redeem himself after his death. If Ethan had treated you with kindness, if he had shared the inheritance, the trust would have been split 50-50ths. But because he chose greed and cruelty, he gets nothing. Ethan stared at me. The look in his eyes wasn't anger anymore. It was pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at the Rolls-Royce outside. He looked at the expensive watch on his wrist. He realized in that second that he didn't own any of it. "Josh," Ethan stammered. His voice was trembling. "Josh, look. This is crazy. We can work this out. We're brothers, right? Dad was clearly not in his right mind. But we can fix this. 50-50? Like Henderson said? I'll let you have the guest house back. Hell, you can have the master suite." I looked at him. I saw the desperation. I saw the sudden pivot from bully to beggar. It was pathetic. Vanessa scooted away from Ethan on the couch, creating a physical distance between them. She was already calculating her exit strategy. I stood up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the Rolls-Royce. This is the moment that changes everything, I thought. I have the control. CTA. This is the moment that changed everything. When I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for being patient with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me by liking this video and commenting number 1 below, so I know you've journeyed with me to this point. This not only helps more people find this story, but it tells me that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to share the rest of this journey. I turned back to face them. "I'm not interested in a deal, Ethan," I said. My voice was strong, steady. "You told me I was useless. You told me to find somewhere else to die. You wanted me erased." I was angry. I was grieving. Ethan pleaded. "No, you were gloating," I said. "Mr. Henderson, please execute the transfer of assets immediately and freeze all supplementary cards issued to Ethan and Vanessa." "Done," Henderson said, typing on his tablet. "Wait," Vanessa shrieked. "My credit cards? I have appointments." "Not anymore," I said coldly. "And Ethan?" He looked up, tears of panic in his eyes. "Give me the keys to the Rolls-Royce. Now." The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator in the distant kitchen and the frantic breathing of my brother. Ethan looked down at his hand, then at the key fob resting on the coffee table. The Rolls-Royce key, the symbol of his phantom victory. "Josh, please," he whimpered. It's leased in the company name. If you return it, we lose the deposit." "I'm not returning it," I said, walking over and picking up the heavy key fob. It felt cold and solid in my hand. "I'm confiscating it. You're not insured to drive company vehicles anymore. You're a liability." "A liability?" Ethan stood up, a flash of his old anger returning, but it was weak, like a dying ember. "I built the connections for this family. I'm the face of the business." "You're the drain on the business," I corrected him, looking at Sarah. She handed me a file she had prepared overnight. "I've audited the last 3 years, Ethan. The consulting fees to shell companies in the Caymans? The gambling debts disguised as market research? It's over. I'm firing you. You can't fire me. I'm your older brother. I'm the trustee, and I'm the majority shareholder now. You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." I nodded to Henderson. He made a call. 2 burly men in suits, private security Henderson had brought along, stepped into the doorway. "This is insane," Vanessa shouted, standing up. She looked at Ethan with pure disgust. "You said you had this handled. You said it was all yours." "I thought it was," Ethan yelled back. "You're a loser," Vanessa spat. She turned to me, her expression instantly softening into a seductive, pleading smile. "Joshua, surely you don't blame me? I was afraid of him. He made me treat you that way. I always liked you, Josh. Remember when we—" "Stop." I cut her off. The disgust I felt was physical. "You're worse than him, Vanessa. He's a bully, but you're a parasite. Pack your bags. You have 1 hour." "1 hour?" she screeched. "I have 3 closets full of clothes." "Then you better start folding," I said. "Anything left after 60 minutes goes to charity. Goodwill seems appropriate." Vanessa stormed out of the room, screaming obscenities. Ethan stood there, alone. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The golden boy had turned into rust. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't have any cash. You froze the accounts." I looked at him. I remembered the rain. I remembered the box in my hands. Find somewhere else to die. I wanted to crush him. I wanted to tell him to sleep in the gutter. But then I looked at the photo of Mom on the mantelpiece. She wouldn't have wanted me to be a monster. She would have wanted justice, not cruelty. "You can stay," I said. Ethan's head snapped up. Hope flared in his eyes. "Really? Oh, Josh, thank you. I knew you were in the guest house," I interrupted. "The basement unit. The one with the damp problem. The one you made the gardener live in." Ethan's face fell. The basement? Josh, come on. It smells like mold down there." "It's a roof over your head," I said, pocketing the Rolls-Royce key. "And you'll get a stipend. $500 a week. For food and essentials. If you want more, you can work for it." "Work? The landscaping crew is short a man. You start Monday. Minimum wage. If you're late, you're fired, and the stipend stops." Ethan looked at me as if I had spoken in an alien language. "Manual labor? Him? Take it or leave it," I said, turning my back on him. "Now get out of my sight. I have a meeting with my lawyer." Ethan stood there for a long moment. He looked at the security guards. He looked at the luxury he was losing. Then, with a slump of his shoulders that signaled total defeat, he turned and walked toward the back door, heading for the servants' quarters. When the door clicked shut behind him, the silence in the room changed. It wasn't tense anymore. It was peaceful. Henderson closed the blue folder. "Well done, Joshua. Your father would be proud." "He would," Sarah said, squeezing my arm. "You were amazing. Start folding." God, that was satisfying. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 5 years. My knees felt a little weak. I sat down on the sofa, my sofa. "It's not over," I said, looking at the mess of red cups on the floor. "He damaged the company. I have to fix it. I have to rebuild the foundation." "You have the resources now," Henderson said, "and you have the authority. The maze is solved. Now the real work begins." I looked around the grand living room. Felt different now. It didn't feel like a museum of my parents' expectations or Ethan's ego. Felt like a blank canvas. "First things first," I said, standing up again. "Sarah, call the locksmiths. I want every lock changed by tonight. And call the dealership. Tell them the Revuelto is canceled. Tell them to refund the deposit to the trust." "And the Rolls-Royce?" Sarah asked, grinning. "You keeping it?" I looked at the key in my hand. It was heavy, ostentatious, everything I wasn't. "No," I said. "Sell it. Put the money into the scholarship fund. I'll keep driving my Camry for now. It runs fine." Henderson chuckled. "A wise choice, but perhaps get the dent fixed." "Maybe," I smiled. For the next hour we worked. We signed papers. We transferred titles. We established the new order. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room. I walked out to the balcony, the one Vanessa had stood on yesterday. The rain had stopped. The sky was a brilliant, burning orange. I looked down at the driveway. My beat-up sedan was still there. But now it wasn't a symbol of my failure. It was the chariot of the victor. I saw a figure moving in the distance, near the guest house. It was Ethan dragging a suitcase across the gravel. He looked struggling. He looked human. I didn't feel joy watching him struggle. I felt a sense of balance. The scales had finally tipped. I went back inside. I walked into Dad's study. It smelled of leather and whiskey. I sat in his massive chair. Felt big, but not uncomfortable. I opened the top drawer. There was a letter there, addressed to the executor. I opened it. It was in Dad's handwriting. "Dear Josh, if you are reading this, it means you stood up for yourself. Finally, I knew you had the heart to care for us, but I needed to know you had the spine to lead us. I'm sorry I was hard on you. I'm sorry I let Ethan strut while you worked. I had to be sure. A fortune like this destroys weak men. Ethan is weak. He needs the money to be someone. You are strong. You are someone with or without the money. Don't hate your brother. Pity him, and lead him if he lets you, but never, ever let him drive the ship. Proud of you, son. Dad. Tears pricked my eyes. Real tears this time. Not of anger, but of release. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I had my answer. I had my home. And for the first time in my life, I had the control. But as I looked at the ledger on the desk, the real books that showed just how deep Ethan's fraud went, I realized the storm hadn't completely passed. Ethan was down, but people like him don't stay down without a fight. And Vanessa, she was out there somewhere, and she knew where the skeletons were buried because she helped dig the graves. This was a victory, yes, but the war for the soul of this family, that was just beginning. 6 months. That's how long it takes to turn a sinking ship around if you're willing to throw the heavy cargo overboard. And by heavy cargo, I mean the years of mismanagement, embezzlement, and ego that Ethan had piled onto the family legacy. I sat in what used to be my father's office. I had changed it. The dark, imposing mahogany furniture that smelled of cigar smoke and intimidation was gone. In its place stood a sleek, modern glass desk and ergonomic chairs. The heavy velvet drapes were pulled back, letting the sunlight flood in. I didn't want to hide in the shadows anymore. I wanted transparency. I looked at the quarterly report on my tablet. The numbers were green. For the first time in 5 years, the Karma Foundation wasn't just bleeding cash into administrative costs, a polite term for Ethan's lifestyle. We were actually funding the initiatives Dad had started. The Inner City Scholarship Fund, the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, the local food banks. I stood up and walked to the window. Down below, the estate looked different too. The overgrown hedges were trimmed. The fountain, which had been dry for a year because Ethan didn't want to pay for the pump repair, was flowing again. And there, near the rose garden, was a figure in a neon yellow vest pushing a lawnmower. Ethan. He stopped to wipe sweat from his forehead with the back of a dirty glove. He looked thinner. The soft paunch of expensive dinners and laziness was gone, replaced by the lean muscle of hard labor. His tan wasn't from a beach in Cabo anymore. It was the farmer's tan of a man working 10-hour shifts under the sun. I checked my watch. It was 4:55 p.m., almost quitting time. I grabbed my keys. Not the heavy brass keys of the Rolls-Royce. I had sold that monstrosity 3 weeks ago to a tech billionaire in Silicon Valley. The proceeds alone funded a new wing for the children's hospital. No, I picked up the fob of my new car. A Porsche Taycan. Electric. Silent. Efficient. It was a machine of the future, not a monument to the past. I walked out to the driveway just as Ethan was wheeling the mower back to the shed. He saw me. He stopped. For the first few weeks, he would glare at me with pure hatred. Then, it turned to sullen silence. Now there was something else. Fatigue, yes, but also a strange kind of resignation. Maybe even respect. Missed a spot near the gazebo, I said, pointing. My tone wasn't mocking. It was the voice of a boss checking work. Ethan looked at the spot. He nodded. I'll get it tomorrow. Shift's over. Fair enough, I said. How's the back? It feels like broken glass, he grunted, pulling off his gloves. But the chiropractor costs $80 and that's a day's wages. So I'm dealing with it. Welcome to the real world, I said. Ice helps. And stretching. He looked at the Porsche parked in the driveway. Nice car. It gets me from A to B, I replied. Mom's birthday is Sunday. I'm going to visit the grave. Ethan looked down at his muddy work boots. I don't think I can go. I don't have a suit. You know, since I sold the Armani ones to pay off that credit card debt you refused to cover. You have a stipend, I reminded him. You could have saved. I'm paying for my own food now, Josh. Do you know how much cheese costs? It's insane. I almost laughed. The man who used to drop 5 grand on a bottle of wine was complaining about the price of cheddar. It was the best education he had ever received. "I picked up a suit for you," I said. "It's hanging in your closet. It's not Armani. It's off the rack. But it's black, and it fits." Ethan looked up, surprised. His eyes were unguarded for a second. "Why?" "Because you're her son too," I said. "And because you've shown up for work every day for 6 months. You haven't stolen anything. You haven't lied about your hours. You're learning." "I'm surviving," he corrected. "That's the first step." I was about to get in the car when a courier van pulled up to the gates. The driver hopped out and buzzed the intercom. I walked over. "Delivery for Joshua Sterling," the driver said, handing me a thick envelope. "Legal courier." I signed for it. I knew what this was before I even opened it. The return address was a law firm I recognized. The one Vanessa had hired. I opened it right there in the driveway. A lawsuit. Vanessa Sterling versus the Karma Trust and Joshua Sterling. She was suing for loss of lifestyle, emotional distress, and claiming that her signature on the prenup was obtained under duress. She wanted $10 million. Ethan walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. "Is that from her?" "Yeah," I said, flipping through the pages. "She's going for the jugular. She says you coerced her into signing the prenup and that I manipulated the will." Ethan read over my shoulder. He let out a bitter laugh. "Coerced her? She practically wrote the damn prenup to protect herself in case I went broke. She wanted to make sure her jewelry was separate property." "She's desperate," I said. "I heard she's staying at a motel in Jersey. Her friends dropped her the second the credit cards stopped working." "She called me last week," Ethan admitted quietly. I looked at him. "And she wanted me to steal the ledger, the real one. She said if we could prove you were incompetent, we could overturn the trust." My grip tightened on the paper. "And what did you tell her?" Ethan kicked a piece of gravel. He looked at the house he couldn't enter, the house that was no longer his dominion. Then he looked at me. "I told her that for the first time in my life, I'm actually sleeping at night, even on that crappy mattress in the basement, because I'm not lying to anyone. I told her to go to hell." I felt a knot in my chest loosen. That was the test. The real test. "Get in the car," I said. "What?" "Get in the car, Ethan. You smell like cut grass and sweat, but I don't care. We're going to see a lawyer. Not mine. Hers." "Why?" "Because we're going to end this. Together." We drove into the city in silence. The Taikung hummed along the highway. Ethan touched the dashboard, admiring the technology. "I used to think cars were about noise," he mused. "About making people look at you." "Power is silent," I said. "Only insecurity is loud." We arrived at the flashy downtown office of Vanessa's attorney. We didn't have an appointment. We didn't need one. When you control a $28 million trust, doors tend to open. We sat in the conference room. Vanessa walked in 10 minutes later. She looked brittle. Her hair was still blonde, but the roots were showing. Her designer dress was a season old. She saw Ethan and her eyes lit up. "Ethan, you came. Did you bring it? Did you bring the evidence?" She ignored me completely. She thought Ethan was her accomplice. Ethan stood up. He didn't look like a landscape gardener in that moment. He looked like a Sterling. "There is no evidence, Vanessa," Ethan said, his voice flat. "Because Josh isn't incompetent. He's the only reason there's any money left." Vanessa's smile froze. "What are you talking about? He stole our life. He made you a servant." "He gave me a job," Ethan said. "And he gave me a reality check. I was a leech, Vanessa. And so were you. I was your wife. You were a gold digger," Ethan said. "And the mine is closed." I placed a folder on the table. "This," I said to Vanessa's stunned lawyer, "is a record of Vanessa's spending during the marriage. $4 million in 3 years. But more importantly, this." I slid a second document across the table. is the date-stamped surveillance footage from the security system inside the house. Vanessa went pale. It shows you, I continued, loading silverware and jewelry into your bags 2 hours before the reading of the will. That's theft. That's grand larceny. I haven't filed charges yet because I didn't want the family name in the tabloids. But if you pursue this lawsuit, I will hand this footage to the district attorney by 5 p.m. Vanessa looked at her lawyer. Her lawyer closed his file. Mrs. Sterling, the lawyer said, standing up, I can't represent you if you've committed a felony against the defendant. I'm terminating our counsel. Vanessa looked at us. She looked at Ethan, pleading with her eyes. Ethan, baby, please. I have nowhere to go. Ethan looked at her. I saw the pain in his eyes. He had loved her in his own shallow way, but he shook his head. Find somewhere else to go, Ethan said. He used the exact words he had used on me. But this time there was no malice, only a sad finality. We're done. We walked out of the office. In the elevator, Ethan leaned his head against the wall. He let out a long, shuddering breath. That was hard, he whispered. Doing the right thing usually is, I said. She's going to be homeless. She has a degree, I said. She has health. She can work. Just like you. Yeah. Ethan chuckled darkly. Maybe the landscaping crew needs someone to rake leaves. We drove back to the estate. The sun was setting, painting the sky in purples and reds. Josh, Ethan said as we pulled up to the gate. I found something. In the guest house basement. Behind the old boiler. What? A box. Mom's box. My heart skipped a beat. Mom had died 2 years before Dad. We thought we had gone through everything. What was in it? Letters, journals, and a recording. A recording? Yeah, cassette tape. Remember the old recorder she used to dictate her garden plans? We parked. We went straight to the guest house. It was small, damp, and cluttered, but Ethan had kept it surprisingly tidy. He went to a shelf and pulled out a dusty shoebox. Inside was an old cassette player. He pressed play. The tape hissed for a moment. Then, Mom's voice filled the small room. It was weak, breathy, recorded near the end. Arthur, I know you're worried about the boys. I know you think Ethan is lost. But he's not lost, honey. He's just sleeping. He's been given too much too soon. You have to wake him up. And Josh, oh my sweet Joshua, you worry he's too quiet. But you don't see his strength. He's the roots. Ethan is the flower, flashy and fragile. But Josh is the roots. You have to let the roots take over, Arthur. It's the only way the garden survives. Make the plan. Do the trust. Break Ethan's heart to save his soul. Promise me. The tape clicked off. I sat on Ethan's narrow bed, staring at the floor. Tears were streaming down my face. She knew. She had orchestrated it too. It wasn't just Dad's harsh lesson. It was Mom's desperate love. Ethan was crying too, shoulders shaking, face buried in his rough, calloused hands. She called me fragile, he choked out. She was right. I broke the second the wind blew. But roots can heal the flower, I said softly. If the flower stops trying to poison the ground. Ethan looked up. His eyes were red, raw, and for the first time completely honest. I don't want the money back, Josh. I really don't. I don't trust myself with it. But I don't want to be the gardener forever. I want to build something. I have ideas. Real ones. Not scams. We'll see, I said. I stood up. Monday morning, 8 a.m. Come to the office. Not the garden. To do what? To pitch me, I said. If you have a real idea, a viable business plan that fits the foundation's mission, present it. I'll review it. If it's good, I'll fund it. As an investment. With oversight. Strict oversight. You do that. I'm the trustee, I smiled. My job is to grow the assets. If you can help grow them, you're hired. If not, the lawn still needs mowing. Ethan smiled. A real smile. Thanks, brother. Don't thank me yet. I said, walking to the door. My interest rates are killer. Sunday morning. The cemetery was quiet, bathed in the soft light of early autumn. The leaves on the oak trees were turning gold and russet, a natural fire that warmed the gray stone of the monuments. I stood before the double headstone. Arthur James Sterling and Martha Elizabeth Sterling. I placed a single white rose on Mom's side and a bottle of aged scotch on Dad's. It was a waste of good liquor, maybe, but he would have appreciated the gesture more than flowers. Ethan stood beside me. He was wearing the black suit I had bought him. Fit him well. He stood straight, hands clasped behind his back. He wasn't the hunched, defeated man he was 6 months ago. He carried a new kind of dignity, the dignity of a man who pays his own bills. I played the tape for Dad last night, Ethan said softly. I sat here and played it. I hope he heard it. He heard it, I said. He wrote the plan because of it. I hated him for a long time, Ethan admitted. Even before he died. I hated the pressure. Everyone thought I had it easy. But it's hard being told you're the golden boy every day. You feel like a fraud. You know you're not gold. You're just gold-plated. And you're terrified the plating will chip off. And when it chipped off? I asked. I found out there was actually some steel underneath. Ethan looked at me. Rusted, maybe, but steel. I nodded. The project you pitched on Monday. The low-income housing initiative using recycled shipping containers. Ethan tensed up. Yeah? You haven't given me an answer yet. It's good, I said. The numbers work. The social impact is high. It fits the trust's charter. So the board approved the seed funding this morning. You're the project manager. Salary is $60,000 a year. No bonuses until the first unit is occupied. Ethan's jaw dropped. 60,000? That's a real salary. It's a living wage, I corrected. Don't spend it all on cheese. He laughed, and the sound echoed through the trees. It was a clean sound. We walked back to the car. Not the rolls. Not even my taikung. We had walked here. It was only a mile from the estate. As we walked up the driveway, I looked at the mansion. It loomed large against the sky. For 30 years, it had been a fortress of secrets. A place where affection was a currency and loyalty was a transaction. But now the windows were open. I could hear the staff inside. Not invisible servants, but people I knew by name, laughing in the kitchen. The foundation was operating out of the West Wing. The ballroom was being prepped for a charity gala tonight. I had taken back the house, but I hadn't kept it for myself. I still lived in the master suite, but the rest of the house belonged to the mission. You know, I said to Ethan, I'm thinking of moving out. Ethan stopped. What? Why? You fought so hard for this. I fought for the control, I said. I fought to stop you from burning it down. But I don't need a 6-bedroom mansion. It's too big for one man. It's lonely. Where would you go? There's a loft downtown, near the office, near the life I put on hold for 5 years. I'm thinking of turning the main house into the foundation's permanent headquarters. Maybe a museum for Dad's art collection, open to the public. Ethan looked at the house. He looked at the balcony where he had stood that rainy day, smoking his cigarette, thinking he was a king. That would be fitting, he said. Dad always wanted people to admire his taste. And Mom wanted the garden to be seen, I added. So what happens to me? Ethan asked. Do I still live in the basement? You're the project manager now, I said. You can afford rent. Get an apartment, Ethan. Get a life. A real one. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I will. We reached the front door. The same door that had been closed in my face. The same door I had walked through with a key I wasn't supposed to have. I turned to Ethan. I held out my hand. He looked at it. He hesitated. Then he took it. His grip was firm, rough. The handshake of a man, not a brother figure, not a myth. Welcome home, Joshua, he said. I never left, I replied. I was just waiting for the storm to pass. That night, at the gala, the house was full of light. Hundreds of people, donors, beneficiaries, community leaders, filled the halls. I stood at the podium in the ballroom. I wore my charcoal suit. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Sarah in the front row, giving me a thumbs up. She had been named the foundation's chief legal officer. I saw Mr. Henderson, sipping champagne, looking like a cat who had eaten the canary. And in the back, near the entrance, I saw Ethan. He wasn't drinking. He was talking to a local councilman, showing him blueprints on his phone. He looked animated. He looked alive. I took a deep breath. My father used to say that wealth is a test. I began. The room went silent. He was right, but he was wrong about one thing. He thought the test was about how you keep the money. It's not. The test is about how the money keeps you. I looked at the crowd. For a long time, this family failed that test. We let the gold plate the steel until we couldn't breathe. But we stripped it off. And what we found underneath was something far more valuable than $28 million. I paused. We found the truth, that you can inherit a house, but you have to build a home. You can inherit a fortune, but you have to earn your worth. And sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you actually own. I raised my glass. To the roots, I said. May they always hold the garden together. To the roots, the crowd echoed. I drank. The champagne tasted crisp and cold. Later that night, after the guests had left, I walked through the quiet house one last time. I walked into the library. I ran my hand along the spine of the ledger, the old, battered book that had started it all. I didn't need it anymore. The accounts were balanced. The debts were paid. I walked out to the porch. The moon was high. The air was crisp. I took the key to the front door off my ring. I placed it under the mat. Not for Ethan. Not for Vanessa. But for the next chapter. I walked down the steps to my car. I got in. I didn't look back. The rearview mirror showed only the road ahead, illuminated by the twin beams of my headlights, cutting through the dark. I was Joshua Sterling. I was the accountant, the caregiver, the brother, the outcast, the heir. But mostly, finally, I was free. My story was never really about the $28 million. It was about the estate of character. Through this journey, we learned 3 brutal but beautiful lessons. My father's detailed trust wasn't just paperwork. It was a parenting tool from the grave. He knew simply handing cash to an unprepared heir, Ethan, would destroy him. By creating the displacement clause and the poison pill, he protected the legacy and forced us to show our true colors. Lesson: if you have assets, don't just leave a will. Leave a plan that protects your family from their own worst impulses. Ethan thought his value lay in his bank account. I thought my value lay in my servitude. We were both wrong. It took stripping away the money for Ethan to find his work ethic, and it took the crisis for me to find my voice and authority. Lesson: your net worth is not your self-worth. I could have walked away when the door closed. I could have accepted the victim role. But justice isn't given. It's claimed by those who read the fine print and stand their ground. Lesson: being good doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is hold people accountable. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have given Ethan a second chance like I did? Or would you have left him in the cold to teach him a permanent lesson? Drop a good in the comments if you think I made the right choice, or tell me your perspective on forgiveness versus justice. I read every single comment and I learned from you guys every day. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most expensive thing you own is your integrity. Don't sell it cheap.